Welcome to We're Not Wizards.
To another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for August. Okay? It's troubled times. The population's just getting bigger and bigger now. It's just disaster after disaster. Things are just going wrong, left, right and centre. I decided I need some help to bring me in. So I brought a gentleman by the name of Stevie Allan. I also brought a gentleman in by the name of Ross Glover. Now they're from Tip the Table Games. Unfortunately, I've realised that I've only got space for one of them. So ultimately, one of them's going to go and there will be one survives. So joining me...
Very nicely done. Very nicely done.
Talk about one survives. I've got Stevie Allan. I've got Ross Glover. Hello gentlemen. How are you doing?
Hello there, how are you?
I'm very, very good. I'm very, very good. It's the best thing to do is obviously the sun is shining, the birds are singing, and rather than us both getting out there and actually mowing the lawn that we've been asked to do, we thought we would sit around and we would talk about some games, and we would actually talk about your game that is coming to Kickstarter imminently. I think the word is that right, Ross? Is it coming? Is it appearing very, very soon?
If we get our fingers out our backsides and get it sorted out, yes. But yes, imminently is the correct term.
I guess the first question is if it was a question of leadership, who is the leader between the two of you? Is it yourself, Stevie, or is it you, Ross, that would kind of claim that mantle?
I would say it's Ross. He's probably the more driven of the two of us. But you know. We take turns, I suppose. We take turns.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
I would agree. My turn's a lot bigger than Stevie's.
He's kind of rolling the dice while you're kind of doing the whole worker placement thing and kind of dealing the cards and getting the dip together right. And putting the kettle on and filling up the dishwasher and just making sure everything's kind of, I guess, kind of like hunky-dory. I suppose we better do the admin and we better say hello to everybody who's out there. Hello, thanks for listening. The reason that we do this is because there's still not enough podcasts that talk about tabletop. There is a good couple of us in Scotland now. We've got ourselves, we've got the fantastic Unlucky Frog, we've also got the wonderful Giant Brain podcast. But apart from that, nobody else, at all. And the other reason that we do this is because I've been speaking kind of on and off to Stevie for a while. Well, both of them through Twitter, on and off, watching kind of things kind of percolate like a fine coffee. And we got around to talking, and currently there is a copy of One Survives with Steve, who's our writer for the site. So he's away playing it, giving it a good couple of play views before he puts together his words. So I'm not here forearmed or forewarned or nothing. So that's kind of a good situation to be in. But, I guess the first question to ask is, for yourselves, how did you guys kind of end up kind of working alongside each other, kind of becoming friends? Stevie, how did that kind of happen?
So, well, we're actually, Ross is actually my brother-in-law. So it wasn't through choice, but
it's his sister's fault.
Yeah, exactly. But it happened. It just so happens that we got on very well, which is a bonus. Ross and I probably we maybe played some video games together back in the day, but board gaming never really factored into how we when we were meeting each other or getting to know each other and all that sort of thing. It's something that's came along more recently, probably more so now that we've both got families, we use board games as a way of entertaining the families while we're away, that sort of thing. And it was just an idea that we had in that type of scenario when we were away as a family.
So do you get to play quite often together as an extended family? Because one of the things I find is that there's two sides to my side of the hobby, which is there's the side of the hobby which is for kind of like where I bring out code names in Sunset Beach and the kind of love letter and stuff like that, and the family are quite happy, Escape from Atlantis and things like that. They're quite happy to sit down and play that. As soon as they see me go for something a bit more meatier and heavier, then everybody all of a sudden needs to go because they've left a casserole in the oven or something like that. So, have you two kind of ended up playing the heavier games together then, Ross? Is that how that's kind of panned out?
No, not for me. And I've got to say, I'm almost that kind of charlatan in this space. So my gaming experience from board games is your kind of more mainstream family stuff. So it's the Cluedos, it's the it's Timeline, and it's that kind of stuff. And a lot of stuff Stephen was talking about there, kind of holiday games, and quite often we'll holiday together as well, and we end up playing a game of cards, a card-based game. And for me, that was quite important in terms of what we were designing. I didn't really want it to be a heavy game that you would spend an awful lot of time on and an awful lot of setup time on. I bought Pandemic, and I set it up with my daughter and my son. And I know that's not a super heavy one, but by the time we'd set it up, they went, you know what, Dad, I don't want to play this. Yeah. And it's one of the best games out there, but that whole setup piece and the time that they invested in it, they're just not of that age to really kind of want that. So it was quite important that we were designing something that was easy to pick up, easy to play, and didn't really need that investment of time.
Did you put the brakes on a few of the ideas for the game then as you were developing it? Was Stevie kind of like, now if we can just do a bit of worker placement here, and then this will be deck number 5, this will be deck number 7, we'll get the expansions in here as well, and you're like, Stephen knows the conversations. From the very, very outset, we were actually sat in a hotel when we started designing this, and we were looking at the card games that we had with us, and that was Timeline and Uno, and I'm kind of going, it needs to be a card game so you can take it with us. And Stevie was saying, but if we could have hit points, and you could have some counters, and every time you get attacked, then you could maybe have a sheet of paper that had different attributes on it and scores, and one could have strength and one could have more health, and that's and it's like, hold on a wee minute, it's a card game we're trying to build, not a board game, a full-on board game. So we absolutely had those conversations. Yeah,
I think you did kind of rein me in a little bit on that. I'm a big fan of like small form factor games. The Mint Tin games, Justin Blaskey's Mint Tin games that have been on Kickstarter are like right in my wheelhouse, because it crams so much in to a small space that you can chuck in a bag. And when Ross and I started sort of talking about this, I also like the tangible feeling of components in your hand, but it was absolutely right that when we started to kind of work through the different scenarios and talk about the mechanics that we wanted to employ, they were totally superfluous. Yes, sometimes these things can add to the experience, but they weren't needed, and in some cases they can kind of distract you from what the main focus of the experience should be. So Ross was bang on when he said, let's keep it tightly to the cards and focus our attention on that.
I think that's the first time you've said that, Stevie.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm quite emotional.
I tend not to back down, but I did on this one.
I'm kind of like doing the kinder, nicer version of Jeremy Kyle here, where you kind of all sit about.
There's something quite therapeutic about this.
Confess to each other exactly what's going on. You're amongst friends. There's going to be no judgment here, except for the couple of hundred people that will be listening to the end kind of product. But no, I think, in all fairness, I think this kind of thing, it is important to have somebody that's challenging you to take your idea and to strip it back to the base area that makes it kind of like the fun part of it. If you can strip out as much of the game as possible and you leave the core mechanics in and it's still fun, then that means you've got a pretty decent game. I mean, if you think back to, I mentioned like Love Letter.
Mm-hmm.
The premise behind that is super, is super, super simple. The same with code names and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're alone, Stevie, when you get an idea for a board game and it's a board game where every single letter of board game is capitalised, you've underlined it, you've put it in bold, and you've highlighted it as well.
Yeah.
And then it takes somebody like
Ross to the nth degree, absolutely.
Yeah. What did you? Have you had a chance to? Speaking of minting games, did you have a chance to kind of get your hands on Microbrew then?
No, I haven't. I actually missed it in the Kickstarter, so I was kicking myself. Because I've spoken to Nigel a number of times at different events. Yeah, what a fantastic guy! He was really helpful when we were kind of chatting to him when our game was essentially handwritten cards. Yeah. So we were at the Glasgow Games Festival. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ross. We were sitting with handwritten cards at the time, talking to Nigel about an idea that we had that we thought had some legs, and just what a super guy, giving us lots of advice, and it was really nice to meet people who are genuinely passionate about the hobby, and being successful. That was an eye opener for me. Was how successful his campaigns had been. I've played Carcosa a number of times, and that's fantastic. So it was just really nice. It's such a fantastic experience.
We need to get Microbrew on the table. If you're going to Tabletop Scotland, I think they're going as well. Like I think they've got a stand there. So Microbrew is a fantastic little game. It's actually it's one of these nice little brain burners that you can get away with actually setting yourself up as a little kind of one with two players, and you can play each other off each other because of the way that you're almost figuring out the puzzle that you're given as it's presented to you, and there's a way of kind of playing it kind of that way, so it kind of works out like a little bit of a brain burner, trying to get as many points as possible off the cards that you've been dealt, which is kind of quite interesting. Did you have a couple of ideas in mind? I mean, was one survives? Was that the first and only one that you've gone through, or has there been kind of other iterations of this before you've got to where it is just now?
So I would say that how it actually came about was we were packing to go on holiday. And Steve and his family were going on holiday as well with us. And I was putting the card games in a bag, and I'd said to my son, who is really into horror games, horror movies and that type of thing, I'd said to him, are you aware of any card games or any games we could take on holiday that might interest you, just as a kind of different thing to play? And he was like, no, not really. And that was it. It was just a passing comment. And we ended up on the way back home. We were in an airport hotel for about 6 hours before we had a flight to catch, and it was one of those things where we were just kind of killing time with not much to do, and I said, let's get some paper out and see if we can make a game. So we knew it was a horror game, that was the theme we wanted to go with, and that was about it. So it's for me, and Stevie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's first time around, it's first attempt at this, and We had something that was playable a couple of weeks later at the Glasgow Games Festival that actually went down quite well and seemed to be in a reasonable position. And we've obviously done a bundle of play testing from then. That's almost a year down the line now, and a few different iterations. But the core game's not changed tremendously. And I think, again, that comes back to that point where, it's that point where we've had lots of ideas and lots of things like add a playmat, or you could add character meeple, you could do this, you could add in more scenarios or different weather effects. And all these things might come in at a later point, maybe as some kind of second edition or an expansion to it. Yeah. But it's been a case of, keep it down at the core game, and we'll keep the core game as is as much as we can. So it still feels really familiar to the little cut up pieces of card that we had in an airport hotel, having borrowed scissors from the reception to have something that we could play.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, has it changed how you view games then, Stevie? I mean, has it changed how you looked? Are you looking more towards the kind of the casual kind of market? Are you been investigating kind of what's out there now that the kind of the direction had changed from maybe the big humongous game? It sounds to me that you're looking, it's almost like the direction you're heading is something that wouldn't look out of place in like a Forbidden Planet or something like that, or a local comic shop or something that somebody would just go ahead and pick up because it was priced pretty reasonably and it was a deck of cards.
Absolutely. I think you look at some of the larger big box games, and price is definitely a barrier to somebody picking that up. So when we were designing it and thinking about it, we were conscious of the mechanics that work well with the format that we'd kind of envisioned, and then obviously price point comes into being very important, and especially for things like Kickstarter, you see there's obviously very established producers of Kickstarter campaigns that they are the core price for their product will be high, but people have confidence in them, so don't really think twice about picking it up or putting their money down. Sorry, I should say. With a 6-month wait before they're going to have it in their hands. Whereas we were saying, we keep it tight in terms of the components, hopefully the cost once we've got through all that process ourselves, and make it a nice option for people to pick up, with a theme that isn't very readily available on the market.
Yeah, there's a lot of zombie kind of games out there, but they seem to be the same kind of dungeon crawly type miniatures.
Yeah, absolutely. And who doesn't love a zombie game? There was a time where you couldn't turn for seeing a zombie game, but what I like about our game is the mechanics of it are simple. It's essentially a set collection game with a take that mechanic as well, for good measure to add a bit of sort of how's that type gameplay in a 80s horror slasher setting that we haven't seen, and it just felt like a nice combination of easy to learn, loads of strategy in there once you actually look beneath the hood, and with a theme that some people really like and kind of gravitate towards.
And in terms of the base mechanics then, Ross, and I'm coming at you because you'll probably not use as much, kind of the jargon side of things. But coming from a kind of a base mechanics, what would you do during a turn? How do you actually play the game?
So you've got your 7 cards in your hand. Mm-hmm. That's how familiar I'm saying. I can't even say you've got 7 cards in your hand. But you've got 7 cards in your hand. And then, depending on what that contains, you can send the killer to a location on the island that you're stranded on. And we should say that every player has got the location that they start in front of them. So everybody else knows where they are. So if I've got a card that has the same location as someone else, and I can move the killer to that location. And then that means that they've got to resolve that action by either fighting off the killer by playing a weapon card, by running away, by moving their own character to another location, or they die. So that's quite kind of decisive and ends their involvement in the game. And there is an element of that within the game where sometimes a game can take only 2 or 3 rounds, and then other times the game can take 15, 20 minutes. And each one is different. I think I was playing it last night again with my kids, and I managed to kill myself, which I'd never done before, which is a bit odd. But that was a full-on strategy coming in. If I was playing a move to try and kill my daughter, and then it turned out that she died before I managed to kill her, which then meant my move backfired on me, and I ended up killing myself. So that's not necessarily answering your original question, but I'll go back to, you get 7 cards.
Right, okay.
And you can move your character. You move your character, you can move the killer, or you can go with the set collect piece. And there's a couple of different mechanics in there, so you can't just immediately, if you've got the 3 cards that you need, you've got to be in a specific location to activate those. And you've got to have been in that specific location for more than one complete round. So you can't just go, I'm away and I've won because I've escaped and I've survived. So you kind of use that as quickly as you might think.
Yeah.
And then there's some other special cards that are in the deck that do some interesting things, like make everybody move around different locations. The sacrifice card, which is always fun to play. That was what ultimately killed myself last night. There's themed cards from the horror genre, like Jump Scare, where you can choose any location, and Frenzy is another one, because you'll find that, particularly in a larger group, there'll be more than one person in one location. So a Frenzy card means that the killer attacks everyone that's in that location. So, as Stephen says, though, the more you get to play it, the more you see that there are strategies that evolve in terms of how you can use the cards. And I'll be quite honest and say that wasn't through design. That has just been through playing the game and going, oh, I can do this. I can play Paranoia and it'll move everybody round a space. And that means that they can no longer escape because they were going to be at the docks and they needed to be at the docks. But I've just moved them away from it. And people don't really like that.
Yeah, there's loads of ways of getting one up on other players. And you know, that it's always a good laugh because people have got an idea in their mind how they want to what win condition they're going for. So and there's loads of different ones. But then you doing something as simple as, you know, just one action can have major ramifications on the rest of the game, and they might never recover. And you know, it puts other people in the hot seat to or the sort of pole position to win after that point, and it can change like in the blink of an eye, and it's really sort of dynamic that way.
I'll be honest, I think Ross's explanation was far more complicated than yours, Stevie.
I'm the master of simple talk.
I was thinking that Ross is turning into a right proper gamer there with his, you know, with his using of player elimination terms and things like that as well. I'm quite, I'm quite confused by the whole. To me, I'm hearing kind of locations, set mechanics that you can use. You're basically the killer is the one that you want to be moving around, but depending on where the killer goes, if you're in the wrong location at the wrong time, if you can't play a card to protect yourselves, then you're kind of out of the game. Absolutely.
One of the cool things for me, sorry to cut across you there, and Ross touched on it. So if I attack you, and you play one of your cards to either defend yourself or run away, you then don't get that card back. So your hand goes from a maximum hand size of 7 to 6, which impacts your ability to collect the set required to get off. And so there's a lot of strategy in who do you target to attack, who's got more cards than you, so that you have to be mindful of other people's hand or what you think they might have in relation to what you're doing. So there's kind of hidden depth once you start to kind of scratch away at the surface. That's what I like about it. Because there's loads of card games that, you know, there's a set way of winning, and you all strive towards that, and it's basically a race to the finish. Whereas this can like I say, can change in a heartbeat.
Have you thought about kind of reskinning it with different themes then? Because it sounds to me like this could be something you could be, you know, it could be like the Poisoned Apple game or something like that, you know, something along those lines with different, you know, there's this sounds like, I mean, the most simplistic, again, going back to like your code names and your love letters of this world, the rules are simplistic enough that you can put kind of any old kind of skin on it, and it seems to work kind of well. I mean, is that, I take it, I mean, that must be much further down the line, but have you played with kind of different themes at all then, Ross?
If I was to say there is an alternative version of the cards that's a sci-fi version, and essentially rather than it being One Survives a classic horror edition, it would be One Survives Xenomorph. You see? So rather than escaping the psychopathic killer, you're escaping the psychopathic alien.
You can do an ET version then.
Yeah,
he just comes after you with his glowing finger.
Yeah, and we did toy with... We did toy with them. We've spoken about, not to give all our secrets away in terms of reskinning.
Well, you're already giving. You're wide open now. I know everything.
Goodness me! The other one we spoke about was
an NDA on this. No, too late.
Didn't sign
no, we definitely don't have one set in space. That was nothing that we've spoken about before. It wouldn't work. We tried to do it, and it's a terrible idea.
I definitely wouldn't be editing this bit of the show at all. But, I mean, there's other kind of, as I say, applications when you've got kind of like straightforward mechanics. The player elimination side of things, did you think about ever kind of taking that out? Because I think for some people, player elimination is just like, I'm not touching this with a bar pull pow kind of thing.
We've actually heard that.
Almost verbatim.
Yeah.
So what I think kind of mitigates that is that the game itself lasts, 10 minutes to 20 minutes. So it's not so long that someone's sitting out that they're going to get bored and wander off. It's so even if you are the first person out, you're not going to be sitting about too long. But what I really quite like about it is that I kind of see the game as it's like a kind of storytelling, a chance to do a bit of storytelling. So as you play a card that sends the killer to a specific location, you can kind of embellish it and make it a bit more theatrical. And so the killer creeps from the undergrowth and attempts to grab you and things along those lines. So you can kind of spin it out a little bit and add a bit of your own sort of flavour and twist to it, as opposed to just throwing a card down on the table and saying deal with that. There's loads of options of making it a really engaging experience and getting other people involved and once you start to really kind of see somebody pulling ahead and you start to target them and everybody's kind of focus shifts, it does sort of keep everybody's attention.
What did you do about your art then? I mean, did you get that locally, or did you kind of chuck an offer out there and see what kind of people came out with? Because I must admit, the art itself is stunning looking, to be perfectly honest. I really love this. It's kind of a mixture of realistically, but also slight kind of impressionist kind of shapes where you're using an awful lot of solid colour, which I kind of like. It's kind of like is that somebody that that's doing the art, or did you get that farmed out from somewhere else?
That kind of came about on Board Game Geek, and we were just looking at artists that were looking for for work on it, and we found someone not locally, across in Poland actually. And at the moment we've got a decision to make on this too, in terms of how we take it forward, because if there's been a difficulty in terms of progressing this further forward and in terms of the game and the artwork, we have reached a point where we're talking to this particular artist and costs have escalated more than were originally discussed. So we need to make a decision as to, because we love this artwork too. We think it's really, really good. It fits with the theme. And we need to make a decision in terms of what does our Kickstarter look like in terms of pricing and how we go about it. And it's it's probably the biggest challenge we've faced in terms of, looking at pulling the game together. It came to, I hate to say it, in terms of the whole design piece, it was quite intuitive and we got quite far quite quickly. But this bit's been the challenge for us, I think, and it's the biggest challenge we face. Now we can still use this particular artist and go ahead, but we need to think about what that does with costs. And it's that decision.
It's kind of like it's a double-edged sword, because Kickstarter itself is a very, very visual type medium. Yeah. And I have seen games that look absolutely stunning that unfortunately when you get them to the table, they're lackluster in terms of how they actually play out. And unfortunately Kickstarter seems to be led by it's a very, very visual medium, where a lot of people will look at the kind of the graphics and they'll look at the design of the game and they'll watch the video, and if they get interested enough, then they'll dabble kind of further into the kind of the rules type of thing. So I mean, it's a difficult one, because especially if you're looking at a low funding goal. I mean, if you're look at it this way, if you're looking at a funding goal of say 25-30 grand, there's a chance you've got miniatures in there, which means yes, you'll be spending for the art, but the art will be a certain percentage. If you're only looking for 5-6 grand for your funding, and your art is going to come in at £1,500, once you take off your 10% that you're going to be paying for Kickstarter, it doesn't leave an awful lot at all for kind of the production of the
adds a fair bit of squeeze, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, what we're looking at is if we were, and I know this is a kind of it's that deciding point in the artwork piece, but if it was a case of looking at an alternative artist, we're looking at this style. That's the style that that we want, and that's what we want to produce. Yeah. So it's only to see whether or not perhaps maybe there's another option out there that keeps ultimately the cost of the game down for everybody that would want to back it on Kickstarter, but still gets the quality and the design that we want. So we've got a wee bit of work to do in that space just to kind of finish things off and land exactly where we are. But it's either going to put the cost up a couple of quid in respect of each deck of cards, or we'll find someone that we can keep the cost a little lower but still get the same look and feel, because we don't want to compromise on that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps us stand out having a keen art style. It's all original. This isn't a template. This isn't stock images that's been pulled together. This is somebody's taking the time to digitally produce hand-drawn, stylish art, and there's obviously there's the cost implications for that, but I think it's quite striking when you see it, and and there was a real kind of eye-opener moment when we got the first set of cards printed and the artwork was in our hand. It was like, this is just fantastic. This looks great. This is something that, and I don't want to say it like this looks professional, and that's the air that we want to put across. Is this it should have that professional finish, and the art was very much part of that.
Yeah, I mean, Adventure Mart by DigiSprite. I was lucky enough to get a hold of a prototype which only had 20 to 25% of the actual artwork, and it was in this kind of cutesy kind of almost like a kind of an anime type, almost Super Nintendo type style, but it was enough at the time for them to be signed by Hub Games. So Hub Games picked up Adventure Mart and are actually going to be producing it and making it into a full kind of game. So that's kind of cool. It's really well done.
My memory is failing me slightly, but you were talking to somebody a couple of months ago specifically about this point and whether or not finished artwork influenced whether or not they backed a game or not.
Yes, it was. I think it was maybe Henry. It
was. Yep.
Henry So, because he was in the glorious position where he came on the show because I asked him, and because he says he was a fan of the show, and there's nothing better to stroke my own ego than actually have somebody that listens to the show kind of coming on, and I was just basking in the adulation. But the more important thing was, this was somebody who backs games, who looks at Kickstarter campaigns, makes the decision whether or not they're going to back a game or not. So to me, it was important to kind of be asking the questions and saying, well, what is it you look like? What is it you look at? And one of the questions was, if you see a game where, as I say, when Kickstarter started off kind of not started off, but when it was at its beginning before the Great Ascendancy, and we were getting kind of £3 and £4 million campaigns coming out there, a lot of times you would see a game to say, right, here's 5 of the 50 pieces of art that we need, kind of thing, and here's 5 of the 50 pieces of art that we need. You're going to fund us, kind of help pay for the rest of the art, kind of thing. And I was my question to Henry at the time was, if you saw a campaign that didn't have all this art, would that kind of affect you? And I think there's a bit of an expectation. I think the backer crowd has changed, and I think there's now a bit of an expectation for there to be a lot more of a finished product on display, and you're essentially paying for the game to be made as opposed to be the game to be developed, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know if you guys followed the Dark Souls campaign at all. But,
I never saw it. I've seen the game post-release, but I didn't see the campaign itself.
Well, they came under a lot of flack because after the event they came in and said, right, okay, now we're going to start kind of fully developing the game off, and everyone was like, what, hang on, what do you mean you haven't developed the game, kind of thing, so that was kind of it. In terms of big games, multi-million pound games aside, small games aside, they all come up with the big wall, which is kind of marketing the game regardless of the size of game that you're out there. How have you found it's been getting the word and spreading the word out there? Have you had to, you mentioned the Glasgow Games Festival that you were at. Have you then had to venture kind of further afield? Did you go to the UK Games Expo? Did you go to Aircon? Things like that to kind of help spread the word?
We've not been that far afield. So we've been to a couple of different games cafes. We were over at Red Dice in Leith, and been over there a couple of times and demoed the game and played the game. And we are going across to the Lucky Sparrow this weekend. And we're going to be doing some demoing there, and then Tabletop Scotland. So it's been a wee bit kind of here and there. Been to Games Club in Motherwell, had it at different games clubs in work scenarios as well that we had access to. So we're doing kind of various stuff, but not to any of the big expos or big events. So it's one of these ones which is you never know until you get to the point of actually putting it out there and whether or not you've got that sufficient audience. So what is the sufficient audience? So what numbers do you need to have? A certain number of Twitter followers before you go? You kind of hit the Kickstarter. Do you need to have a certain number of Instagram, and is it across the whole board? Do you add them together? How do you compare who are unique? And it starts to become a bit, well, at what point do we? And actually, is there a point where we just need to progress this and get it to a point where we put it onto Kickstarter and see if it actually takes flight? And if it doesn't take flight, then we can bring it all back down to, where we are, work out what we need to do better, and do it again if needs be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like the guys we've been talking to, the Wreck and Ruin and Blood for Roses, in terms of number of times they've been to Kickstarter and how many, what they've learned in the whole process. And there's an element of that certainly for me too, which is, this is a new experience, but it's really good fun. I'm really enjoying it, and I just want to kind of work through this a little further and see what the next stage is too.
We're really keen to get the game in its current form, with a percentage of its art in place, into the hands of people who can play it, give us feedback, critique it essentially, but then allow us to use box quotes that they can give us to hopefully boost the actual content that's going to go on our campaign page on Kickstarter. People like yourself, the folks over at Unlucky Frog, just people who already have a following, and if we can kind of tap into that a little bit, then hopefully we can gather some pace behind it.
I think it's still difficult to throw the hat into the air and know which side it's going to land up kind of nonsense. Do you know what I mean? I think it's just one of these things. It's impossible. I've said this quite recently. I can't look at a campaign anymore and know. Looking at Kickstarter alone, it's very difficult to tell whether or not a campaign's going to fund.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is down to. I think it's almost down a case of down to interactions. It's almost like for any project that you undertake, you almost like need a champion. You need somebody who's quite willing to grab it and run with it for you, and always kind of be away. And I've seen campaigns that have, for whatever reason, not funded the first time. And, like you said, you mentioned, Ross mentioned Mark, Wreck and Ruin, and Justin at Gladiatores. Both had to turn around again, but I am seeing more and more campaigns having to run second attempts at Kickstarter, and I don't think that's a bad thing anymore. I think it's almost a case of it allows people to build up almost like a pot of funding for people to come back, and I think you almost turn from like a marketing thing into a relationship management situation, where you're then going back to these people who have backed but maybe saw you not fund, going back and saying, right, stick with us, this is the reasons you should stick with us, this is the reasons where you should kind of maybe tell your kind of your friends. What about the business side of things then, Ross? I mean, have you been learning about logistics and production, and are you going like, why did I even bother with this? I'm having to learn so many things.
Yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot of stuff out there that you pick up and you don't necessarily think of straight away. Barcodes, CE marks. Yes. Since we're at the moment, we're still in Europe, and hopefully we would supply to Europe. That's the plan. And then there's all there's the services that will do all the kind of distribution for you, but weighing up the costs against, well, what volumes are we talking about, and at what point does it mean that actually packing things in the house yourself becomes less feasible, and actually you do need to pay somebody. So there's lots of stuff around about that. And even in terms of the production of the cards and the game itself, that's been an interesting experience. And Steve and I have both been working on that in terms of getting quotes in from different companies, whether or not looking at sort of China manufacture or Ludo across Europe. And at the moment we're working with and talking to a UK company, which from that perspective, the benefits we've got there are it's a really quick turnaround.
Yes.
So, essentially we can order quite a large number of decks if we fund, and the decks can be produced within and with us within a couple of weeks. Quite literally, not 3 months, and you don't have that manufacturing risk of producing overseas and getting them back in a reasonable timescale and all that kind of thing. So it is something that we looked at, and we like the UK. The cost isn't considerably more, or it's literally marginally more than we were looking at if it was a Chinese production, but much, much quicker.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, absolutely learning lots and lots about how to pull this together. And that side of things I'm not particularly worried about. I'm more than quite confident. I'm very confident that if we hit funding, that we've got what we need in place to get this out within that kind of 3-month period. But that 3-month period, at the moment, in our kind of plan would be that conclusion of artwork, not the production of the cards. So you've got that balance in that way up of that. Where's your risk? Do you think that the risk is greater in completing the artwork, but the game in itself is completely 100% ready to go, and you've got local manufacturing that can do that really quickly? So we've got one component in the kind of full end-to-end cycle of producing the game that we just need to complete in terms of the Kickstarter. So I'm looking at it from the point of view of being really optimistic that that's actually a good proposition. And, if I was looking at it, would I buy into it? Well, I think that's probably, less risky than perhaps somebody that's got, one version or a prototype ready to go and almost finished, but still has to go into full production. Don't know.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. There's 6 and 2 3s because there's the kind of the tariff situation with China at the moment, whichever way you look at it, if these tariffs come into play fully, then the manufacturers will have to consider looking at raising the prices, and for some people that's going to be enough to potentially wipe out any margin and also wipe out any room for additional costs that they can expect. We've got the destruction of the UK as we know it. Currently kind of going ahead, and I'm not going to say any more. But then again, I mean, on the other side of it, is it going to mean that if you are going to be looking at kind of getting goods produced in Europe, is there going to be an effect on that actually coming into the country? Is it going to be 1 month, it might be a case of everything's fine. It could be the next month that then there's an extra 10% on the prices. And it is making kind of UK manufacturers more attractive, in some ways. And is it a case as, it sounds strange, but is there space within the UK kind of printing side of things for a little engine that could to appear and say, well, we'll make your miniatures game for you, we'll make your bigger game for you, we'll do your cards and your boxes for you. And I wonder if it might end up becoming a subject of necessity as opposed to somebody's business idea. And it's a case of, well, are people so ingrained in looking to get stuff made in China that they might actually turn around and say, maybe we should start looking at what we can do with the UK, which is the cost. Let's face it, guys. It's always going to be the cost, isn't it?
It is, and maybe when you're into more components, miniatures, and just a larger production. But for us, the costs weren't that significantly different, and the quality of the cards that we've got, it's like 350 gram card that these are on. They feel and just work really, really well. Really like them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, we couldn't, I don't think we could get any better going elsewhere. And could it be cheaper? We'd be talking pennies a deck rather than it being, into pounds. So from that perspective, it just makes total sense to keep it here. And to answer your question about, is there a space? Having looked around a space for someone that does this kind of production and brings it all in, I'm surprised there isn't. It's someone that's actually just stepped all over this in the UK. And maybe it's about the volume that's going through, but you just take a step on to Kickstarter or go to any of the kind of conventions that are out there, and how many people are actually developing games or have games ideas. It just seems to be such a huge phenomenon in any case that you would expect there would be that space for a business to really kind of come to the fore in the UK to do it. But it comes back down to cost. If they
give us 6 months and Glover Games Productions will be right out.
He'll be pouring plastic into moulds in his spare time.
It'll be like looking, it'll be like in the background over there going, just leave me alone, I'm trying to get this card cut. He'll be like saying, he says 350 grams, he's already learned all the card thicknesses and stuff like that. He's thinking laminates, he's thinking about how do I put a UV finish on a box and stuff like that. I know your game, Glover.
I'll tell you,
those nice touches.
I'll tell you what, see the difference the difference between 350 and 305. Oh, goodness me.
Can't even talk about it. He'll have to go away and have a quiet word with himself. Have you thought about kind of price? Okay, no, I was going to say you've thought about price of entry, but have you actually thought about, is you put a deadline on this, or are you willing to say, actually, let's just wait until the thing's ready to go? Instead, because I've had a couple of conversations with creators, and they say, well, we've got to launch on the 15th of July. Why? Because that's when my marketing says we're launching, as opposed to them saying, we've got to wait until the thing's ready to go. So are you quite kind of loosey-goosey with the kind of the launch date? Have you set it in stone, or are you saying, well, look, we've got to get this art situation started out, and then we can go ahead and we can look at everything else?
Can I just make a correction? And this made it sound like I knew what I was talking about, but it's actually 340 GSM. Just in case anybody looks back at this in time and says, you said it was 350 and you've only supplied
I'll edit it out, Ross, it's fine. I'm not editing it out.
On to trading standards.
I'm going to put it at the beginning. I'm going to put it at the beginning of the show and just have you kind of on an endless loop going, it's 305, it's 305, it's 305. Just all the way kind of through like that.
No, the 305's no good.
But no, have you thought about saying, well, we're going to get it ready when it's ready to go, or have you put like a kind of almost like a hard line on this to say, right, we're going to launch on this date and this is when we're going to go, regardless of where we are with things?
So we had ideas in our head of when we would like to launch, with a view to, say, like delivering by Christmas or something along those lines. But they've never kind of stuck particularly, and we also kind of threw ideas about like, let's try and end our campaign on specific dates like Halloween or a Friday the 13th, or something along, just to try and be quite thematic about it. But then you go, right, okay, well, what's 30 days back from that or 60 days back from that? Well, that doesn't really work. So we've not really been all that fixated on a particular, a drop dead go live date. We just want to have all our ducks in a row, that we're confident that should we hit the funding target, that we can produce a product that's well-rounded, it's professional, it delivers on all the promises that we make on the campaign page, and not have to make too many sacrifices. So it's a long way of saying, no, we don't have a particular date in mind, but we would rather, we want to be working to it pretty soon, I would say.
What's the charge for the door, son? How much is it going to cost to get on the bus? To be confirmed. Ross, is there anything? What would you say, kind of ballpark?
Yeah, I think it's going to be less than 20, but I would imagine it's not going to be anything kind of less than that, £18. So somewhere between there. So
1867 then. 1867.
Like
about 1867. Like, do you imagine if you put 1867, then people would be going, "What's that significant for?" And you could say, "We'll leave it, and we'll tell you at the end when we fund." And then you'd have all these folk back in at 1867, and then you get to the end and we say, "It just means that we're backed. That's all. Thanks very much. Good night," kind of thing. And then just leave the kind of the mystery there. But no, I mean, that seems decent. It's not, if it's going to be even below the £20 mark, let's face it, you can't get a decent kind of, carry out less than that nowadays, can you?
Not these days.
I mean,
sitting in that, especially if you've got your two families coming together for a meal, I'm taking the £20 wouldn't cover the prawn crackers.
Exactly. I mean, I think price is really important. There's a number of games that I've liked the look of on Kickstarter and other places, and then you go, do you know what? Is it? It's just it wasn't at that kind of sweet price point. So I think what we're targeting is it's at a level that people are prepared to take a chance on it without it feeling like a risk. But also it's you even at that level you do expect a certain level of quality, and so we hope to hit that fine balance where people are happy with what gets delivered, and they don't feel it's been too much of a risk up until the point where it's in their hands.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to go back to the earlier question as well, and just to kind of reiterate that point in terms of ducks in a row that you'd mentioned, Stevie. For us, it'd be good to move forward with it, but we don't want to do that at the expense of moving to Kickstarter when we're still kind of going, and then what do? We don't want to be working it out during Kickstarter. We want to have everything in place for the Kickstarter, so it literally is a case of fund, and these are the things that happen, and this is when you can expect the game. And we're trying to get rid of any kind of variables there that would mean that that's not going to deliver on time. So, that's more what's going to drive it. Having said that, it'd be really good to have it end on Halloween. So we've got a couple of weeks.
Dylan,
we've got a few weeks to work to that.
Such a commercial holiday. It's just stupid. And let's face it, horror is best expressed in situations where you don't expect there to be a horror story. If you think about the best ones, So look at it that way. Mm-hmm. But if people want to keep an eye on this horror story, it didn't come out right at all. Where do you guys exist on the internet webs? Where can we find you? Stevie, I'll let you answer that. And then Ross, you can jump in obviously with whatever card size you feels appropriate at the time.
So you can follow our Twitter handle, which is @OneSurvives, and it's the number one, not the word. You can also go to onesurvives.com and go to our webpage where you can kind of sign up for the newsletter and keep up to date with updates on there. And we're also One Survives on Facebook.
And Instagram.
Oh, and Instagram as well. See, I'm too old for Instagram. That's for the kids. But yes, also One Survives on Instagram.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, I can only wish you the best of luck with the campaign. I obviously have not been looking at the game, but our head writer Steve has been looking at the game, and he will be getting his thoughts down on paper. Well, not paper. He's not going to write it on a bit of paper. He's going to type it on a computer, then he's going to put it on the blog. So he's going to get his thoughts down on a screen.
You're assuming he's survived.
We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you want to keep an eye, if you want to read that when it comes out, just jump onto we'renotwizards.blogspot.com. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to in different places with our worn out faces, you can go on Twitter and find us on We're Not Wizards, on Facebook as We're Not Wizards, on Instagram, because we're down with the cuds, it's We're Not Wizards. You can find us on our normal website, which is we'renotwizards.com, and if you like YouTube, it's We're Not Wizards Tabletop Podcast. If you find us, you'll find us. Don't expect anything wonderful. It's just videos of me looking like a fool. If you like what you've listened to tonight, then please jump onto your podcast catcher of choice, and if you can drop us a rating, that's cool. If you can drop us a subscription, that's even better. If you have liked what you've listened to tonight even more, tell somebody about it. We spread like smallpox, but we're not deadly. We're just a bit cuddly. Or you can jump onto Apple Podcasts and, as I say, give us a rating or give us a review. And as normal, if you are going to give us a rating or a review, don't give us 10 stars. because it makes us big-headed. But don't give us 1 star, because it makes us cry. Give us something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average. And we're just a little bit average. But the people who have not been average is rather wonderful, rather fantastic. Stevie and Ross.
Thank you
very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you very, very much for coming on. There's only a couple more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Stevie?
I've been called many, many things, but that's not one of them.
Absolutely brilliant. Ross, are you a wizard?
No magic here.
Fantastic. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Stevie. Say goodbye, Stevie.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from Ross. Say goodbye, Ross.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll 6s, make something awful, and beware of what it seems like innocent day trips out into the woodlands, into that cabin, and you wait until nightfall, you try to get out there, and then you realise that your car is mysteriously broken down with some leads have been removed, because you might hear just a scratching noise in the dark, or maybe some footsteps, and then somebody's coming towards the door and they're trying to get in, and they're just trying to get everybody, but potentially just maybe one survives. Bye-bye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.